and welcome you all to today's webinar, which is all about keeping backyard chooks, which I hope you are aware of, with Jessamy Miller, who you can probably see on your screen. I hope you've had a beautiful weekend so far and a nice Sunday morning. It's pretty chilly in Melbourne, crisp, foggy morning. So I've actually got very foggy windows because I've got the heater going on. So hopefully everyone's cozy in their homes. My name is Beck Nichols and I work in this Sustainable Environment team at the City of Stonington, and I've organised this webinar and the series of webinars that we've been running if you've joined any of those. I do want to start by acknowledging that many of us, most of us are meeting on the lands of the traditional owners, and I do want to pay respects to elders past, present and emerging and recognise the cultural heritage of this land. And I myself am living on the lands of the Wurundjeri people in Richmond, so I want to pay my respects to them, and perhaps if you know the traditional owners of your area, you can pop that in the chat box and acknowledge country. We have had over 300 people register for today's webinar, so Chooks definitely a very popular topic, and excited to have so many of you joining and watching today's recording. This is actually the very last webinar in a series of online events that I've been running in May and June, and they've all been about helping our community to live more sustainably and also take climate action from home. And the series has actually been a partnership between City of Stonington and some of our neighbouring councils, so the City of Yarra, City of Port Phillip and Glenara City Council. And this series has really been our response to the pandemic, to supporting new skills of self-sufficiency and helping our communities reduce their costs and reduce emissions and live sustainably at home. And the webinar series has been pretty amazing. It's had a pretty wide reach. I think we've had over 1,800 people either attend or just watch the recording of one of the sessions that I've run. So that's pretty amazing. And we're excited that it's had such a wide reach. Of course, this webinar and this series is also part of a much wider program that the City of Stonington runs to support our community to live sustainably and to reduce their emissions and impact. And we do recognise that we're in a climate emergency, and that requires immediate and urgent action for all of us to reduce our emissions. So us as a council, but also, supporting our community and leading the way for our community. And at Stonington Council, we're doing this in a number of ways, reducing emissions, and we're doing that through solar, through LED lighting, through energy upgrades, but we're supporting our community with a whole range of free events and programs, including webinars like this, but also leadership training, support for energy efficiency and advice, recycling and waste education, support for gardening sustainably, tree planting, clothes swaps, and so much more. So if you do live in Stonington or you want to know about all of our free events and programs, subscribe to our environmental newsletter, and I will share a link after this webinar in an email with you. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we launch into things. So we have set you all up muted. We'll try and keep you muted throughout in case you do want to ask a question, except for if you want to ask a question. We do like to see your faces, so if you're comfortable leaving your camera on, that's nice. We will record the webinar and I'll share a link with you in an email after this. But just a reminder, if you don't want your face appearing in that recording, you can switch off your video. We will have a bit of time for questions, so you can do that using the chat box. So you can do that anytime throughout. Whenever a question pops up, just type it out and we'll note it down and record it and ask it when we get the chance. Or you can switch on your microphone and video and ask a question that way as well. And we will do our best to get to all your questions, but there may be lots, so we might not get to every single one. But Jessamy's also got some notes that we will share after the session that will be helpful for you. And we are running for just about 90 minutes until 12 o'clock today. And I also wanted to introduce Jane Spence, who's the coordinator at the City of Stonington in the environment team. So she's helping out behind the scenes, helping to manage your questions and make the meeting run smoothly. So I do want to introduce our lovely presenter for today, Jessamy Miller, who should be on your screens. Jessamy is a writer, photographer, and chook mother and enthusiast, as you'll learn. She writes for the ABC Organic Gardener and is an educator, running workshops like this one, helping people all over to look after healthy and happy chooks. Plus, she's also got a very cool chook Instagram, which I just discovered this weekend. So perhaps we can share details on that after this. So over to you, Jessamy.
Thank you so much, Beck. It's absolutely lovely to be with you, and thank you everyone for coming along. Special thanks to Beck and the City of Stonington for sponsoring these workshops. I've watched some of them, have been absolutely fantastic, and I'm really excited to share my love of chooks with you today. And in fact, I have brought a little friend along, so hopefully you can see this little bantam. This is my Belgian bantam mottle, and you can see she is a tiny little chook and also slightly surprised. So it just goes to show you can have a chook to fit just about any space. She weighs about 700 grams, and she's a lovely placid little chook, and she's going to attend the workshop with us today. So I'll pop her in here. Now the chooks and I are on Wurundjeri land, and I'm just going to share some pictures with you. So here we are, and welcome. And I'm going to tell you why I love chooks to start off. So we all know that chooks lay eggs, so chooks are a great way to have a little bit of sustainability in your backyard where you can grow your own food, even in a small space. You don't need a farm. Even the chooks' waste is useful, so you can compost their manure and put it on the garden as fertiliser. And they have got super scratching abilities, and you can put them to work in the garden, have a rest on the deck chair and let them do all the work for you. Now, compared to cats and dogs and even other livestock, chooks are really cheap, and they're actually very cheap to feed. My chook food costs a quarter of the money of the cat food, and the cat has never laid me an egg, so I reckon that's pretty good. Chooks are really easy care to look after, and they're a great pet for kids because they teach responsibility, and they teach a little bit about the reality of life and death because they will of course die one day. And you know, it teaches kids to handle animals and where our food comes from. Science has actually shown that chooks will give you a mental health boost. They've been great going into retirement homes, cheering people up. So that's a handy side benefit. But actually none of these are the reason why I keep chooks. I keep them because I love them. They make me laugh. They're really funny little characters, and they're just great to have around. And I actually don't feel like my house is a home unless I've got some chooks clacking in the backyard and keeping me entertained. So how do you keep your chooks contented and most productive? The number one thing they need is safe, weatherproof, predator-proof housing. That is number one. They also need enough space to express their natural behaviours. When we're in town, especially, we need a sensible approach to cleanliness and hygiene. And, you know, we also need to give our chooks something to do to stop them being bored. So some environmental enrichment. We all love food in this house, and so do our chooks. So really good nutrition is important. And it's good to have a health management plan in case something goes wrong with your chooks. So if you can hit those, and that's what we'll talk about today, you will have really happy, healthy chooks. So before you get into your chook keeping journey, or as anyone who has chooks already will know, the first thing to do is always to check with your local council, either on the website or give them a call and find out what the local regulations are. So for example, in the City of Stonington, you do need to get a permit to get chooks, and that's free. Someone will come out and do a site visit and advise you of numbers and look at your property. In my local council, which is Darebin, there's a limit of 5 chooks because it's quite inner city, but outer suburbs might have 10 chooks, and in the country, the sky's the limit, which is why I've always wanted to move back to the country. So other specifications for council in town are usually that you can have no roosters because they're just too noisy for the neighbours. And they also might give you some advice about your site. So at Stonington, for example, you need to have your hen house 1 metre from the fence And this picture is of my hen house here. I've actually got a slimline water tank behind my hen house, which hopefully you can just see there. So it's a perfect use for that 1 metre space to plumb in a nice slim water tank and collect some rainwater to give the chooks their water. You also need to site your hen house in Stonington 4 metres from a dwelling. So that might be your dwelling or your neighbour's dwelling. It makes great sense because no one wants flies coming in the back door in summer. So council will also ask you to keep your property clean and tidy. And this is really important in town. So we don't want to be attracting pesky wild birds like sparrows or rodents. So having a clean and tidy hen house, keeping your food sensibly locked up are all really important. And it makes for good neighbours. As chook keepers, we really want to be good neighbours because we want our neighbours to tell our councils, oh my gosh, we love having chooks on the street. We get to visit them. Occasionally we get eggs. It's a fantastic, fantastic relationship. We can drop our scraps over, and that positive encouragement will keep councils supporting chooks like they are now. So we all want to work together and make chook keeping really best practice in the city. Okay, so talk to council. And then I'd also like to give you just a little bit of a chook profile. So what are chooks? What can you reasonably expect from them? There's a lot of myths about chooks about. So the first thing is chooks are social. So you really want to keep at least 2 to keep your chooks happy. I can see lots of people have logged in who have 2 chooks, and that's fantastic. If you're starting out, I recommend having 3 or more, just because that means if one chook dies, they've still got a friend to keep in company and you don't have to worry about sourcing another chook. But 2 is fine, 3 is great, and you know, more is always better, in my opinion, if you have the space. So chooks do live in a pecking order, and so having a flock enables them to express that pecking order. If you thought, how many chooks do I need to keep, say, a family of 4 in eggs? If you had 4 or 5 chooks, I think that would be plenty of eggs for you over most of the year. Now, how long do chooks live? So hybrids, which are the red hens that we all know, perhaps as Isa Browns, they live for 2 to 4 years. Whereas if you get purebreds, you would expect your chooks to live 4 to 8 years. But there's no guarantees. That's just a rough guide. And I've actually had chooks live 10 to 12 years, which was quite surprising. So when you buy your chooks, the best time to get them is usually called point of lay. So you're looking for a POL chook. What that means is it's a pullet, so a young hen, and she hasn't started laying yet, but she's about to start. So she's about 16 to 18 weeks old. That means that the breeder has done all the work for you, and she's ready to roll. People might like to get chicks, and that is really, really fun and a lovely thing to do with children. It's always a good idea to buy sexed chicks, so you know that you're bringing up hens, because of course, if they're not, they will actually, you will end up with half roosters that you have to find a way to deal with. Chicks are a little bit more work, but that's half the fun. So you will need to have a heat lamp and feed them a special diet and just take care of them like babies. So if you're looking for something more low maintenance, the point of lay is a great time to buy chooks. Now, chooks have a natural cycle. So your purebreds, so the hybrids actually lay all year round. They're bred for intense laying, and that's why they live much less long, because they actually wear themselves out with their really high laying rate. So they lay all year round, whereas purebreds follow a more natural cycle. They will lay in spring and summer, every day or every second day, and then they go through a molt in autumn. And the first time this happens, people get a bit surprised to find that their backyard is full of these horrendous looking mottled feather dusters, half plucked looking chooks. But it's completely natural. But they do need to stop laying over that time because they're putting all of the energy into replacing their feathers. So they stop laying in autumn and they will have a break in winter. This is completely natural, and they're not being freeloaders or anything like that. They're actually building up nutrition to start laying again when spring comes around. So that point will come soon. We're on the shortest day today, which is great. So my chooks will start to think about laying. And chooks are stimulated by light. So it's actually the level of light that brings them back into lay. So it's as those days get a bit longer. It makes perfect sense in nature because, of course, winter is not a good time to hatch chicks because it's too cold and there's not enough food. So they're just following their nature's pattern. With the hybrids, they will lay for about 18 months or 2 years, and then they have a molt, and that's when the commercial places get rid of them and replace them, and you can get your spent layers then. And you never actually know with your spent layers, will they lay another 2 years, or they may just lay for another 6 months, because it's quite taxing on their bodies having that, that big burst of laying. So let your chooks enjoy their winter break. They'll be better for it. They'll lay stronger shelled eggs in spring, and it's just completely normal. And that's what helps them live those longer years. Now, chooks, they're actually really smart. I don't know if people realise how smart they are. So they can count up to 5, apparently, research has found, and they actually can tell the difference between more or less, and they remember things. So chooks are really trainable. They love routine, so they want to go to bed at the same time each day, and they want to follow that structured lifestyle that chooks love. They prefer the familiar to the new. So you can train chooks to do anything that's in their natural spread of behaviours. So you can train them to jump over a hoop, to peck at a xylophone, lots of fun things like that. And especially if you make the same sound and shake some grains around and reward them. You can train them to come when they call. Thanks, Big. So having them come when you call is really handy, because it means you can lock them up any time of the day if you need to. But one thing to remember is you can't train your chooks to not do things in their range of natural behaviours. That would be digging up your garden, eating your seedlings, and sitting on the back door mat and doing a lot of poo, which we have a rule, no chooks on the deck. Only people who don't know about the rule in our house is the chooks. So yes, you can train them, but only for certain things. Now, when you're around chooks, always remember that they're a prey animal, so they can be quite nervous, and we are really big to them. So always use a nice, quiet voice and talk gently to your chooks, and that will help soothe and calm them. They'll get to know your voice, and they'll like being around you, and it's a bit of entertainment for your neighbours when you're talking to your chooks in your animal voice. We all have one, chooka chooka chook. My neighbours have a bit of a laugh. Now, when you're moving around chooks, it's important to move quietly and steadily and not make sudden fast movements, because that will keep them calm, and that will really build up a relationship of trust and help tame your chooks. Now, I know kids love to have chooks to cuddle and play with, and I feel that chooks make great pets because they offer a really good opportunity for children to learn how to handle animals in the ways that I've spoken about. So if kids want to create a special relationship with their chooks, I encourage them to sit in the chook pen and with a little tin of food and let the chooks approach them. And over time, the chooks will really begin to trust the child, and they'll be hopefully happy to lead up to some cuddles. Keep in mind that chooks have different personalities, so not all of them will love cuddles. Some are independent-minded, some are very timid and shy, some are quite narky and confident, but there's usually one in every flock that is quite a people-centred and maybe trained to be a good cuddling chook. So I always ask kids not to chase chooks, because to me, when a chook is running away from a child, it's saying no, thank you. And kids really understand that when the chook's running away, it's saying, no, I don't want to hang out with you right now. I've got chooky things to do. So letting the chooks approach the child and then hopping on the child's lap for a little food treat is a really nice way to build the trust that leads to a really strong relationship and works with other animals as well. So what sort of chooks can you buy? Most people start with hybrids, Isa Browns. They're your absolute most common chook. There's lots of them about, so they're really easy to find. They're a great starter chook. They're pretty cheap to buy. So you're looking at around sort of $35 to $45, maybe even $25 for an Isa Brown pullet. They are really reliable layers. They've been selectively bred to lay every day. So you can expect a beautiful brown egg every day from your ISA browns. However, something to keep in mind is, while they're really cheap to buy and easy to source, this laying can be quite taxing on their bodies, and some ISA browns end up with ovarian problems later. They simply wear out their egg laying apparatus. So they don't get that natural break that purebreds get, and they do just wear out. So you may be looking at vet visits later on at the end of your ISA brown's life, which is much shorter than a purebred's because they do just wear out. So they also have a few special needs and a few little quirks. So they're known for really obsessive pecking. They love to peck things. So they are one breed that it's really good to give some environmental enrichment and a focus for the pecking. And also they need to have a really good diet so that they can meet their egg laying potential, because they do lay so many eggs. So once they lay for those 18 months and they have that molt and start laying again after a little break, they tend to lay really large eggs. So the egg size increases, and that's why they're no longer used in the commercial systems after that point, because the eggs are too big to fit in with the other eggs, and it can lead to lots of egg breakages. So it's also important to keep the shell grit up for them as well, and just keep an eye on them. And I say they're good for they're for a good time, perhaps not a long time, because you just never know how long they're going to last. But they have lovely personalities and they make great pets. So you might also be thinking purebreds, and purebreds are great. There's so many different breeds and varieties and sorts. They tend to be really hardy, especially if they're adapted to your area, and they tend to live really long lives. Obviously, it does depend on the management, and we can't guarantee a long life, but they have that potential. As I mentioned, they do take that winter laying break and have a rest, and that's really important, and that's what enables them to lay well into old age. So my 10-year-old silver spangled Hamburg still laying 2 eggs a year. Good on her. I told her not to worry about it. Some chooks will actually take a retirement in old age. They might not lay for the last 2 or 3 years. So that's something you might want to factor in if you end up with a flock of older girls, what your plan is for them. So every purebred is unique, and I believe that there's a purebred for everyone. Keep in mind that breeds can be quite rare and unusual, and sometimes can be difficult to source compared to your ISA browns. And if you're really environmentally minded and have a sustainable garden and perhaps use non-hybrid seeds, and then purebreds would be a really natural choice for you, because they're more sustainable, live longer, and don't require replacing as often. So what sort of purebreds could you get? Most people want a top layer. The best laying purebreds are Anconas, and this is this lovely upright spotty bird here. And also the Aussie Langshan. I keep these myself. They're fantastic. I've got the bantam size, which is 2/3 the size of a full fowl. And these are great layers too. I'm amazed at how large an egg this small bird lays. I don't know how she does it, and I don't even want to think about it, but for a bantam, it's a great egg. Now you can combine ISA browns and purebreds together, and lots of people like to keep a couple of ISAs for eggs and a couple of purebreds for the beautiful colours and patterns and general enjoyment and the personality. Some breeds don't go as well with ISAs, so a really, really gentle breed like a silky might have a bit of trouble, but most purebreds will go well. Now, what about pets? There's some gorgeous breeds that make great pets for kids. Silkies, which are the fluffy birds we're talking about before we started, they are really super placid and gentle and lovely for children. My favourite pet is pekins, and you can see my pekin, the white delight here, sitting on my son's shoulder, and they are full of personality. They have feathered feet and big skirts, and they're just really great little characters. Australorps, the classic Aussie chook. It's a big, large and in charge, full of personality chook. They're terrific. And you can see the little Belgian bantam in the photo, and I showed it to you earlier. A really gentle, tiny little chook that's lovely and won't intimidate kids in any way. Some chooks are just so beautiful that you might like to have them as backyard decoration. When I got my chooks about 10 years ago, I was working on the idea that we grow to look like our animals. So I chose these beautiful silver spangled Hamburgs. This is the spotty chook here because I thought as I get older, I might end up looking like one of those and it wouldn't be a bad thing. But then I saw the pecans, which is a big fluffy chook, and I realized that I was deluding myself with the spangled Hamburg and I've been a pecan all along and I might as well just give up. So these are laced Wyandottes with the lacing on the chook, another gorgeous bird that people really love to have in their backyard. And do explore the purebreds because there's lots of gorgeous looking chooks and very funny looking chooks. I'm going through a beard phase at the moment, so chooks with beards, lots of fun. So another fun thing for choosing backyard hens can be to get a rainbow eggs for your show off to your friends, post on Instagram. It's always nice to have a rainbow egg plate. So if you want to make your kids green eggs and ham, the Aracanas actually lay blue eggs. If you want a nice brown egg, the Welsummer is a lovely, lovely bird from Holland. And the French Marin lays really, really dark brown eggs. Now, chooks, just a little tip for you, chooks with red earlobes lay tinted or brown eggs, and chooks with white earlobes lay white eggs. So if we go back and look at these two lovely girls, we can see the Wyandotte has a red earlobe, whereas the silver spangled Hamburg with the dots has got a white earlobe. So she lays the white eggs, and that can be really useful to have for craft or things like that. So many beautiful chooks out there to enjoy. It's hard to make up your mind. Now, where to get new chooks if you're wanting to get some for yourself or add to your flock? Actually, there's no chook supermarket, which is lucky for me. But you can source them on Gumtree. Lots of people advertise their chooks on Gumtree, and it's always a little bit buyer beware, so read the recommendations, but you can actually find some great chooks. And I know a lot of show breeders who advertise their excess stock on Gumtree, so you can get some really good, beautiful chooks. There's poultry swap websites with buy and sell pages like Backyard Poultry is one. And actually Facebook, a lot of breeders, especially around Melbourne, advertise, like big breeders who hatch every week, advertise each week on Facebook, so keep an eye there. Now, if you want to source a beautiful purebred, the place to go is the Breed Club, and there's a breed club for every breed. There's usually a national breed club, but there's actually often a state breed club as well. So have a look on the internet and contact the secretary of the club, and they'll be able to set you up with a local breeder. And it's lovely to make a relationship with the club or join, because then you get support that's specific to your breed. Now, just a little tip, don't forget to take a carry cage when you go to pick up your new chooks. You don't want to get there and find you've got nothing to carry them in. I picked up these two cages. One was in hard rubbish and one was at the school fete. So $5, and they are ideal for carrying chooks. So how many chooks can you introduce to your established flock? Actually, it's always best to introduce two. So you don't want to end up bringing one chook into established flock, because there's going to be a bit of hustle and bustle, and it takes a while to chooks to accept someone new because they're well settled into their pecking order, and it's a bit of a challenge to them. So always introduce two together or more, not just one. And there's a particular approach that really works to help things go smoothly, and that's called the holding pen approach. So what that is that you bring your new chooks in and you set them up in a separate cage, or you wire off part of your run and let the chooks spend about 2 to 3 weeks with the flock, looking at them, talking to them, maybe having a little bit of swearing through the wire, but not actually able to touch them or get to them. So using those two separate pens, or a holding pen inside the bigger pen for the new chooks, means that the flock can get used to them, get to know them, and it helps settle them in smoothly. So then once that's finished, you would add the new chooks at night onto the perch, just as though they all wake up together in the morning. It's like they've always been there. What do you mean these are new chooks? No, we saw them yesterday, didn't we? And I also like to add some really big entertainment on that day, like maybe a new bale of pea straw. So when they go, maybe I should have a bit of a dust up with that new flock, they're like, oh no, but look, pea straw. I'll think about that later. I've got a distraction. And do it when you're home on the weekend or you're going to be around, because there is going to be a dust up or two and you're going to have to monitor the proceedings. And if you find that the established flock really doesn't take to the new chooks, you might have to take them back out and put them in the holding pen for another week. But you would expect a few little dust ups because they need to work out where they belong in the pecking order.
Jessamy, we've had a question, can you adopt them from the RSPCA or a shelter?
I think it's a lovely idea to do that, and I encourage you to, because those chooks need a home and deserve a home as much as any others. Do accept that that chook might live for 6 months or 8 years. You just never know what you're getting. But that said, it's well worth going down to your local shelter and having a look and giving those chooks a lovely life from that point on, and I'm sure they'll thank you. So I say go for it. Now, let's get to the meat of this talk. What do your chooks need? The number one thing that chooks need, and if you can keep keeping your chooks alive, they need a safe, predator-proof lock-up hen house for nighttime. So that is a must. Picture has two that I have had. So I would call this a small cottage style hen house, and then your full-size classic Aussie style hen house with the big roof. Chooks may like to roost in the neighbouring trees, but the fact is there are a lot of predators around and everything loves chicken. We've got foxes, cats, dogs, lots of predator birds like hawks, even magpies can swoop chickens. And you really are, if you're up north, there'll be pythons who love a little chicken snack. So if you want to keep them safe, you really need to encourage them to go into the hen house at night and lock them up. And you might need to train them to do that, but it's well worth it to keep them alive, basically. Now, what sort of system would you have with your hen house? Some people like to free range, and this is actually how I started keeping my chooks, because I had the idea that they would beautifully roam the backyard. Free range is great and chooks love it. It works best in an established yard with hardy, quite spacious, with really hardy plantings like natives, and with a low stocking density of chooks. And also I've found that the small bantams with the feathered feet, like the two pecans in the photo, are much easier on the garden than full-size chooks, which can really make a fantastic crater on the lawn. So even, so you're going to have to protect your garden and your veggies somehow from the chooks, or they will absolutely destroy them. It is their job to do that, so they will do it with great pleasure. So here's some strategies that I use. I've got wire waste paper baskets from a very cheap shop, and or cloches, wire frames, and I've also used wire around the edge of the veggie garden that the chooks can actually peck through and enjoy a bit of, but they can't get in. So protect your garden if you want to have free range. Some people earlier asked me about husbands and chooks. I do advise keeping the chooks off the back deck if you want a happy husband. My husband got a bit irate the day he walked out the back door and put on his Crocs. And as he was walking down the path in his Crocs, he felt something warm and wet. And he was just like, Jessamy, the chook food in my Croc, that's it. So at that point, I knew that free range was probably not for us, and I had to prioritise my husband on that occasion. So rather than locking up the veggies, you might want to actually lock up the chooks. So a wire run is a really great way to keep your chooks out of the veggie garden and also safe from daytime predators. You don't have to keep your chooks in these systems all the time. So if they're in a wire run, they can still come out for a bit of a free range each day. And I call that happy hour. So I go out after work for an hour or two, fossick around the garden, have a cup of tea. You can make it a glass of wine if you wanted. And just enjoy some time, and they get a bit of added exercise. So a wire run can be really useful to keep your chooks safe, or you could actually incorporate the run into the hen house. And this one here, this is called a deep litter system. So a deep litter hen house is basically like a big aviary or hen house run combined. It's much more spacious than your normal hen house because they're in there full time, although you might let them out for some happy hour each day as well. There's about 30 centimetres of deep friable litter in the hen house, and that's what makes the system work, because the chooks are really busy each day. They love scratching around the hen house, but you also need to set that up with a bit of environmental enrichment and some things to do, and I've got lots of ideas for those I'll show you later. But this is an ideal system to have if you are in the country and foxes visit during the daytime, because it's totally safe. And it's also really good if you go away often, or you can't be doing with letting your chooks out each day and locking them up and remembering, because they don't need lock up and let out. They're busy in their pen all the time. And chooks feel really safe and they enjoy it. If it's spacious and enriched, they'll enjoy it just as much as the other systems.
Now, just a clarification, what's the friable litter that you mentioned?
I'll talk about litter onwards, but I'll just say there's lots of different types, and you can get it from your feed store. So you can use tan bark, wood chips, wood shavings, rice hulls, pea straw, anything that chooks like to scratch and is dry and absorbent makes a great litter. And you can just source it. You can get the wood chips from council for free if you're lucky, or the local feed store. Now, the last system that people use is the movable chook tractor. And what that allows you to do is move your chooks around the garden and put them to work in different areas. And also, so they're not perhaps destroying one area of the garden, you can spread them out. These are really handy if you want to keep your chooks in a certain place. Lots of chook tractors I've seen, though, I find probably aren't for 24-hour, 7-day-a-week chook living, because they're a bit small. So I would add quite a bit of free range, or perhaps combine this with a spacious run as well, just to get them out and give in a bit more space and than just the tractor. So what does your hen have? How do you keep these predators out? So there are a few features. Obviously, you need to have a lock-up door, and you need a really sturdy roof and walls. Now, it's really important in Australia that hen houses have ventilation, because chooks get really hot in summer. They can't take off their feathers. They don't sweat, so they really can suffer from the heat. I don't know if you've ever spent a night wearing a feather boa, but it is hot. They are really insulating feathers, so the poor chooks have to be looked after in summer to keep them cool. So make sure that you've got plenty of ventilation. Obviously, this has to be balanced with being weatherproof, and especially from wind and rain. We don't want the chooks in the damp. But you can see these two hen houses I have here. One of them has a great front window of galvanized mesh, and the other one actually doesn't have any windows at all. So I would be saying that the galvanized mesh window is a much better option for the chooks out of these two hen houses. So when you are, so a mesh window is a great idea. Do make sure it's galvanized, and that is the really hard, rigid mesh. And if you choose a really small aperture or hole, you'll find that you're keeping out sparrows, rodents, pythons, as well as foxes, cats and dogs. So it's really worthwhile choosing that galvanized mesh. Don't choose chicken wire, because it's a bit flimsy for the actual hen house. So the floor is really important. If you've got a cottage style hen house, like the small one I showed a couple of slides ago, they actually have a pull out wooden floor, and that is foxproof. So it's really easy and the job's done. If you are building a standalone hen house, or you've bought one from the big stores or something, you do need to put in a floor. So if you can lay a concrete pad, that would be fantastic, but not all of us are able to handle concrete. So you can actually make one really easily using concrete pavers, so that you can buy quite cheaply. I think they're about 99 cents, big concrete pavers set flush, or we used bricks that had made our patio that we pulled up when we renovated. And it's really important that the floor extends out beyond the hen house. And you can see in the photo that there's some bricks extending out, and then we've got that lovely litter on the floor for the chooks to scratch. But nothing like no rodents, no snakes, and especially no foxes, who love to dig, can actually get through that solid floor. So very important. If you've already got a cubby house or a shed, you can transform that easily into a hen house just by putting in some ventilation, bit of wire mesh, that sort of thing. And if it's got, and making sure it has got a nice solid floor and a lock-up door. So, and those features are a must, like you really need to have them. But there's actually a few things that over time I've found useful to have. So these are maybe on the wish list. You might not be able to have all of them, but it's handy to have some of them. So when I built, got my hubby to build this big hen house for me, which you can see in the photo, I really wanted a veranda or great overhang with the roof. And I've loved having this. It's really useful because it keeps the wind and rain off the hen house completely. And it actually creates a dry area in front of the hen house. So even when the chooks are in the rain for a week or something and the whole backyard is soaked, there's still a dry area in front of the hen house on the dirt as well as the floor of the hen house for them to scratch about, have a bit of a forage and have a dust bath. So it provides a really useful space for them in winter, as well as lots of lovely shade, a nice shady spot in summer. When you go and buy a new hen house, make sure you can get inside it to clean it. Even if it's quite a small hen house, make sure you can get in the door, because at times you want to brush down the walls, or if a chook's ever going to get sick, it will be in the far corner of the hen house where you can't reach. So being able to get in there is really a must. So check the doors and make sure you can get in. I like to be able to walk into my hen house and do routine maintenance. Saves me bending, really handy. But the cottage hen house, make sure they do have a good door that you can get into as well. Daylight. People often don't think whether a hen house is well lit, but we already know that daylight stimulates your chooks to start laying. And I grew up on a chook farm, and the chooks in the east facing hen houses always started laying first in the season because they got that extra daylight. So if you've got that wire mesh window that's letting in some nice light into your hen house, it will really be helping your chooks meet their laying potential. And it means that you can keep the food and water in the hen house and they can see it. And perhaps you can have a little sleep in the morning and know that they're still getting food and water and daylight, and let them out a bit later, which, we all like a sleep in. Now, you might have a small garden and a cottage hen house, which is great. If you've got a bit more room, it can be handy to have a hen house that's big enough for you to keep the chooks in and lock them up when you go away and know they're safe. Or maybe you've got a wedding to go to and you have to go off at lunchtime and you want to lock the chooks up before you go because you're coming home at 1 a.m. If it's big enough and it's well lit, you can actually put your chooks in there and not have to worry about them to the next day, and it saves you thinking about the lockup. Now, one really important tip, your lock-up hen house will only work if you remember to lock it up. And foxes have a routine or a beat, so they will follow the same path every night. So they'll wake up and they'll go and visit every hen house in the wider area. And when I'm riding my bike home from seeing my friends and having a dinner or something, I often see foxes here in the inner city. There are more foxes in the city than in the country per square metre because there's more food for them here. So they will check every hen house, and the people often say to me, I can't understand it. It was the one night I left the door open. That was the night the fox happened to go past. But actually, that fox would have gone past every single night for the past 2 years because you're on his beat. He knows there's chooks there and he's just having a little look. So to make sure that you remember to lock up, set your phone alarm for fox clock and you'll never forget. Just having that reminder can be really handy. I'm a bit of a nervous Nelly. I always double check. So before I go to bed, I always pop out and just double check. And I would never let my kids often like to do the lockup for me, but I always double check if I've left the chooks with a child, just in case. Now you can get automatic doors for your hen house. They are solar and battery operated, and they can work really well. So I would consider these a help for the chook keeper, but they don't replace the chook keeper. So they're great. They will go up and down at a certain time each day. You need to remember to change that time as the seasons change. What happened to my friend was that the chook door went down at the normal time, and she went out to double check and there were no chooks in the coop. They'd all been rather naughty, staying out late. The days had got a bit longer, and if she hadn't gone out to check, then they would not have been, they would have been at risk of being taken by a fox. So even with an automatic door, I feel it's a good idea to double check and make sure it's worked, that it hasn't you know, glitched for some reason. That shouldn't happen, but just always double check because things can happen. Chooks can be naughty. It only works if they actually go in. Now, where in your yard should you site your chook pen? We've already talked about what the council would like, which is 1 metre from the fence, 4 metres from a dwelling, kept clean and tidy. I've got some ideas to add to that. So it's traditional in Australia to have your hen house facing east, and that's because chooks really enjoy that morning sun from the east, and facing north is fine too. If you're going to avoid one orientation, it would be facing west, because that hot afternoon westerly sun in summer is just too hot for chooks. And the south's generally not recommended because it's just a bit cold and miserable for most of the time. Now, you'll have nest boxes in your hen house. Do not face them to the west either, because chooks spend about an hour laying, and it can get really hot in there in the nest box. So if they can be on the south side, that's ideal, but definitely not facing west. Now, you know, when you're maintaining your chooks, you're going to be changing their water and feeding them really regularly. So have a think about where the tap is and where you're storing your feed, perhaps in the shed or the garage. Make sure that your chook pen is handy to that water tap and feed. What the chooks would like from their orientation is a spot that is really shady in summer so that they are not too hot, but has some lovely sun in winter so that they can stretch out and enjoy a bit of sunbathing. And I can tell you that there is nothing happier than a chook laying out in the sun. They absolutely love it, especially if they're having a dust bath at the same time. So how do you achieve this? I think deciduous trees and bushes is a really great way, or perhaps larger canopy trees that give a dappled shade. But having some trees and bushes around your hen house will really help create that ideal environment. Now, we've talked about the hen house, but what about if you decide to go with the wire run? You might just want it there to keep the chooks out of the garden. So it might just be a 2 metre fence that you're not too concerned about predators. It really depends what predators you have in your area that you need to look out for. If you've never seen a fox come during the day because you're in a busy place and there's a dog or a dog next door, then you just probably need a fence. But if you want to make your run completely predator proof, which is always a good idea, you would want to have a roof on it and a nice stable wall, and that will offer you daytime fox protection. The advantage of having a wire roof, although it requires more building and infrastructure, is that you can also exclude birds. Wild birds are a real pest to chook keepers and drive everyone nuts. They come in, pigeons and sparrows, they eat all your chook feed on you, and they carry diseases and mites and lice. So we want to keep them out if possible. So a wire fence is a great idea. Sometimes, for example, if you have a big tree in your chook pen, you can't manage to have that roof. You could also have a floppy fence. So that's a fence where the top of the fence sort of flops outwards for about 50 centimetres of floppy chicken wire, which a fox can easily climb 2 metres, but if they get to the top and they have to climb backwards, they will get tangled up in the floppy fence, and that will help to deter them. Really important that you remember foxes can dig, and that you bury some wire mesh of your run into the ground. So about 30 to 40 centimetres of skirt buried into the ground. So you just need to dig up a little trench and bury it in, and perhaps angled outwards about 45 degrees, and that will stop anything from digging in. Once again, it is worthwhile landscaping your hen house, your poultry run, because it will give your chooks a real psychological boost. Chooks are prey animals. They feel much safer with some lovely trees and bushes around for them to avoid those overhead predators. So anytime a bird flies overhead, my chooks freeze, or they might go and hide under something because they're a bit anxious about predators. So having some bushes or trees to hide under will really help them feel safe. If you do decide just to have a wire run with no roof, your chooks may decide to fly out, and you might have to clip their wings. So you only clip one wing and just the flight feathers. It's very easy to do. And there's lots of tutorials to show you how to do it online. It doesn't hurt the chook at all, and it's well worth doing to stop them flying. So I do mine every time I see them flying out. It cuts off their beautiful feathers, but it doesn't hurt them at all. So it's worthwhile. So what furniture do you need in your hen house? Well, you've got to have a perch for your chooks. And the perfect perch for a chook is a piece of 2x4 timber. That's a very standard bit of wood, and it's squared off. And this is much more comfortable for chooks to have a squared off piece of timber with a little bit of a resting place on it, rather than sort of your round broom handle, which is quite slippery and uncomfortable for them. So go for something like that. We actually use the old futon here to make this perch, and that's worked well because it's also squared off. So the height of the perch will basically be whatever your chook's flying ability meets. So if you clip their wings, you might make it a bit lower. Something like the silkies you can see in the corner here. They are not flying chooks, so they've pretty much got a hay bale to flap up onto, and that's about the limit. So that would probably be about 30 to 50 centimetres high. Whereas the Hamburgs love to fly, nothing's too high for them. So you could have about a metre perch if you liked, or higher. Ladder perches are really good where you've got a flock of mixed birds with different abilities, so they can each find the height that suits them. Make sure it's on an angle, because no one wants to be pooed on in the middle of the night on their face. That is not fun for anyone. Keep in mind though, that chooks do use height as a way to express dominance, and it's ideal if all the chooks can fit on one perch at one height. Otherwise, occasionally you can have squabbles at night as they're getting onto the perch and finding the best spot. And if you wanted a rule of thumb, I would allow about 35 centimetres of perch space per chook. The other important part of your hen house is your nest box, and research has found that chooks really value nest boxes, so it's a pretty important part of their day. And I would allocate one nest for each 3 birds. A nest box is about just basically a box about 40 centimetres square. It's got some lovely soft dry litter in it to be comfortable. Chooks like to rearrange that when they're nesting. It gives them lots of pleasure. It's part of the process. And it's great to have your nest box somewhere that's low and dark, because chooks, they're thinking that they're laying under a bush. It's not intuitive for a chook to lay an egg up a tree. Often hen houses have very high nest boxes so that people don't have to bend over to collect the eggs. And that is actually not intuitive for chooks. So some chooks will readily adapt to the high nest box. Other chooks say, stuff it, I'm laying on the ground in the corner. So it just depends on your chooks. You can use anything for a nest box, like you could use an old mower catcher, you could use a beehive super box, anything you like. You could use a drum, all sorts of things, as long as they can get in there and have that nice soft litter and a bit of darkness and a bit of privacy so they can get the job done. There is one strange thing that chooks do though. So as soon as the first chook chooses the nest box she likes and starts laying an egg in there, every chook in the flock will decide that that is the only good nest box, and that's the one that they have to have. And they will all try to force themselves into that nest box, causing delays, fights, stacks on, and a bit of argy-bargy. I will say to my chooks, there's 2 other perfectly good nest boxes over here. Why don't you use one of these? They're free. And the chooks will say, we can't possibly, that one's bad. It's not for us. This is the only good one because she's in there. It must be the best one. So if you find that happening and it's causing a bit of kerfuffle, then the communal nest box is a great way to go. And you can see my 2 pecans in my nest box here. It's basically just that there's no partition. So rather than being about 40 centimetres square, it might be double, 80 or a metre. But it just means that if they all want to pile into the same spot, they can actually find space for each other and spread out a bit, and it really solves the problem. So keep that in mind if you run into that one. Now, space. How much space do your chooks need? I've got a chook book that suggests 37 square metres per chook. I would probably allocate that to my little Belgian Bantam. But I think a full-size chook in a hen house, you would be looking at about 50 square centimetres as being a good space. And in your chook run, I'd leave around a square metre per chook for your first 4 or 5 chooks. And then after that, you might just add on incremental amounts because you've got a bank of space for them to spread out in already. But rather than putting a number on it, it's actually what that space does that's really important and how it functions. So the key is, does it allow the chooks to express their natural behaviours? Now, we already know this from going to the zoo. You want to see a zoo set up so that the animals can express their natural selves, and it's just the same for the chooks. And I think this is where we differentiate ourselves from, say, a battery farm where a chook can't do much in the wire cage, but even though ours might be in a wire run or a deep litter hen house, for example, they can still express themselves and do their work. So ask yourself, can they perch? Does the hen house allow them to perch or the run? Is there a dust bath for them to have their daily bath? Is there room for them to do their daily work of foraging and scratching? This is what chooks love to do. It's what they do all day. So it's really important that they have somewhere that they're spending their time, that they have an opportunity to express that scratching. Can they flap, stretch? And also, very importantly, there's going to be a top chook in your hen house who might give the bottom chook curry. So can the chook get away from bullies? Is there room for them to jump up and have a bit of quiet time somewhere, or be out of sight somewhere and just have a bit of a break? So if your space allows for all that, then regardless of what size it is within reason, it will be a good space. So in that space, the dust bath is really important because this is how chooks keep clean. So they shuffle dirt through their feathers every day. So having a dry dirt dust bath is great in your poultry run. It might be just a hole in the ground that the chooks have made. They're really good at making these, especially in your veggie beds and your lawn. Or you could make your own using a bucket or a planter or a tub, the kids' sandpit, those sorts of things. They will really enjoy having their dust bath, and it's quite fun to watch because they love to keep dirt in each other's faces, and they don't really care about their friends, but they want to be as close as possible. Another fun thing to put in your poultry run is stumps or rocks or to perch on. Chooks love a really high place to sit and survey their terrain. They like to see what's going on. So if you can source a few stumps or rocks or something like that, they will enjoy having those perches, and you're making use of your vertical space, so why not? Now, something really important, especially for those of us in town, is keeping a hen house clean. So clean hen house means healthy chooks, but of course, chooks are creatures that scratch around in the dirt. So rest assured, you do not have to have your hen house as clean as your bathroom when your mother-in-law comes to visit. It just has to be chook clean. And what that means is a common sense approach of using your nose. So when poultry manure dries, it has no odour. So you're looking at maintaining a really dry, friable environment for your chooks with no smells that's pleasant. So it just smells pleasant to you, smells pleasant to the chooks, and it's a pleasure to visit. So you want to enjoy spending time down there, and so will the chooks. So the way we do that is with the litter. Having litter in your hen house means that you can easily remove manure from under the perches, which is the main place it builds up. So you might want to just do a scoop out of your litter of your manure under your perches, compost that, do that maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. But you don't need to replace all the litter. You're just scooping out any clumps to keep the hen house dry and nice. And you can every so often add a bucket of litter in to keep it turning over. The bonus of a dry friable litter is the chooks will do some of the work for you, and hopefully they'll be scratching it up and maintaining it, and that will help any manure dry out into a powder, and it'll just become a dirt that's incorporated in and won't smell and will be fine. However, you do need to clean out your hen house seasonally. So that will be when you replace all the litter and all the dirt and dust. You might use a dustpan and brush to brush down the walls and any cobwebs. Chook pens just do get dusty. Scrub the floor. You would scrub any perches, and you could put a bit of white vinegar in your water just as like a natural help to sterilise it, and clean out your nest boxes and give them a scrub too. So if you did that seasonally and maintained the litter, you can use straw for litter, but I actually find a finer litter is easier to remove the manure from. So I prefer something like wood shavings or rice hulls, but it's completely up to you. So do that seasonal spring clean. Now, there are two things that you really do want to keep clean and focus on, and perhaps check every couple of days. And that is, make sure the litter in the nest box is really nice and clean, because we don't want mucky, dirty, pooey eggs, do we? That is not hygienic. And of course, eggs are porous, so they can absorb odours and bacteria. So keep the nest box clean. And if you see a poo in the nest box, just move it out straight away into the compost. You also want really nice clean water for your chooks. It should be clean enough for us to drink. So you might, I keep a little scrubber on the tap. So I change my water every 2 or 3 or 4 days, depending on winter or summer, and just give a really nice scrub to your chicken's water, so that there's no algae or scum or anything, which is not good for chooks, but it's nice and clean. So the poultry run. Poultry runs tend to turn into a quagmire in winter, and they can look like a dusty plain in summer because chooks are quite hard on the soil with all their scratching and digging. We don't want that. Having a slippery, muddy hen house is no good for you. You could fall over it. It's no good. It's not pleasant for the chooks. So this is where I use a litter as well. So whereas I like a fine litter in the hen house, in the poultry run, I like a more sturdy litter. You can line your poultry run with anything, really. So you could have tan bark, where it's great. Chooks like to scratch it and it absorbs all the moisture. Dried leaves to use can be quite good. Dried grass, but it does need to be completely dry. I really like pea straw, but you could also use hemp bedding is great, or you could have sugarcane mulch. Do avoid straw, because it does get mold growing on it, just straight straw, and so it's not ideal for the chooks if it gets damp and grows mold. And I also don't choose to use hay because that is animal fodder, and I would prefer to leave that to farmers, and rather than wasting it on chook scratchings. So anything like that, that basically anything that's safe for chooks, that can absorb moisture and provide a nice footing, but that they'll also like to scratch and dig and will protect the surface of your run. I like the pea straw myself because it looks attractive. It creates a nice straw yard look. It's great underfoot. It's not slippery. It's really absorbent. But best of all, the chooks love it. There's no happier day in our chook run than new pea straw day. It's a pea straw party, and they get in there, they scratch it, they peck around, they dig it. So it gives them a lot of activity and interest. It keeps them busy, and they actually break it down for me over time. The pea straw, I keep it under cover so that when it's in a bale, it should be kept dry. But once it's spread out in the hen house, it doesn't spoil because the chooks are constantly turning it over and working it and keeping it dry. So it's much better than straw in that respect, and it shouldn't spoil if it's spread out when it's wet. It dries really quickly because it's quite light and fluffy, and it's sort of smaller than straw. So once it gets a bit tired, so I would say that's about 1 to 2 months, depending on the season. If it's really wet, it might be more 1 month, but otherwise 2. The chooks really break it down. They incorporate soil with it, and of course manure, and they break that down too in their scratching. I then use it on my veggie garden as like an enriched mulch, and it looks nice on the veggie garden and protects my seedlings. And it breaks down quite quickly, and it's a fantastic soil addition because it has got those extra additions from the chook run, but it also adds to your soil structure. It feeds all the microbes in the soil, and it's sequestering carbon. So for me, it's a great product because it's got 4 uses. It's a nice, safe, attractive footing for the hen house. It's something to keep the chooks busy. It's a mulch, and then it's a soil conditioner. I really love it. It's about $17 a bale. And your hemp bedding or your sugarcane mulch will be just the same. I just really like pea straw because it's quite nutritional for the chooks, and I've just got an obsession with it, really. Now, health and safety. Do use gloves and a mask when you're handling dirt and that sort of thing in your chook run, because it's very fine dust that you don't want to get into your lungs. And always compost your chicken manure for 6 months before putting it on the garden, because it's very high in nitrogen. And so just if you keep in mind that with your cleanliness, that you're aiming to keep your run and your hen house nice and dry by using some friable absorbent material. So as long as you keep it dry and move out any damp clumps, your chooks will be in a really healthy environment, and it will smell nice and be pleasant for you and not be a burden to your neighbours, which is good. Now, this is the really fun part of my talk, which is environmental enrichment. So this is keeping your chooks entertained and busy, and it's a great way to connect with your chooks and have a lot of fun. It's obviously more targeted at people who have a chicken run or have a deep litter setup. If your chooks are free range, they've probably got enough to do in the garden already to keep them busy. But you can still incorporate some of these into their lives just for fun, and because they're great. So in the picture here, you can see this fabulous hen house I visited yesterday, which has a lot of environmental enrichment in it. These shots are both from the same hen house. So Isa Browns are chooks that love to peck repetitively. It's just a funny quirk that's occurred because of their selective breeding. So giving an Isa Brown a xylophone can really direct their pecking, and you get some beautiful music as well. Maybe you can even get a band going. I have had no luck with my purebreds who don't really like to peck in that way, to peck the xylophone, but they will peck at it if I put some yogurt on it. So I can get them to perform on occasions, but music, not so much, but it's still a bit of fun. Now, the hen house, you can see here, it's got a chicken swing, which the chickens use sometimes, but the thing that they use all the time is this lovely perching tree with the platforms on it. And Diane, the lady who built this, puts a bit of seeds on each of those, and the chooks love to jump up and down and have a little play on their perching tree there, which is heaps of fun and uses up that vertical space really well. So for my money, the best environmental enrichment is still that bale or biscuit of pea straw or other type of enriched straw. And you can see my chooks are buried deep into the pea straw in their run there. They've also got the swing, which, you know, I went through a stage feeling that they had to have a swing. They don't like the swing. They prefer a solid perch. But one day a chook will come along in my life that likes the swing, so I've got it there just in case. The mirror, I think, is terrific. So just a mirror from the hard rubbish. And the chooks really love to preen in front of the mirror because they feel like there's some more chooks that they're talking to that give them a bit of company. So if you ever find that you're left with a single lonely only chook, and you don't want to get more chooks because she just needs to live out her life, then having a mirror is a great option. So you can also put your chooks to work in the garden. So I mentioned that I garden, I use mesh to cut off my garden from the chooks so they can't dig up the roots of the plants, but they actually enjoy pecking through the mesh. So you can grow some greens for them through the mesh and share with them, basically. My kids are never going to eat the silver beet, so I might as well share some with the chooks. But you can also keep them busy by putting them to work. So the time to put the chooks on the veggie garden is after you've harvested your veggies or before you plant your new seedlings. And if you let them on then, they'll dig up the ground for you, they'll uproot the spent plants, they'll eat any weed seeds and any bug infestations, and they'll just do a bit of the preparation work for you, and they'll fertilise as they go, which is not a bad thing, and dig it in for you. Now, you can also really use chooks to be useful in the orchard. So codling moth is a bit of a pest that it's burrowed into the ground in winter, and then it climbs up the tree trunk in spring to get to fruit like apples. If you have your chooks digging around under your tree trunk, they will dig up the codling moth and get rid of it or reduce it, which is really handy. Another pest that is more and more common is fruit fly. So if you run your chooks in your orchard when the fruit's falling on the ground, they will eat up those fruits for you, and hopefully you'll be less likely to get a fruit fly infestation because you haven't got fruit sitting around. my blood plums season is the Chook's favourite time of year, and they actually look like zombies with specks of blood and gore on their face after they've eaten the blood plums. It gave me a heart attack the first time I'd seen them, but they do love to clean up the plums for me, and they have a ball. Now, kitchen scraps and garden clippings are fantastic for chooks, and they can also, so traditionally when farming wives were giving chook scraps, they would have a big pot on the back of the oven and cook up all the peelings and things. So anything that you wouldn't eat raw, the chooks are probably not going to eat raw either, like say carrot peelings or something. But keep in mind that all chooks have different tastes, and different chooks will eat different things. They learn from other members of their flock. So I find that, you know, brassicas, leaves, corn, that sort of thing can be given to them. But often they prefer to have it hung with a bit of baler twine in the run, because they need a bit of traction to pull and bite. And if it's on the ground, it might not be as easy to eat. So you can have a bit of fun with your weeds from your garden. So do look online and check nothing's poisonous first. And just to note, any sort of tomato, eggplant, the solanum family, don't give your chooks any of those, because those are related to nightshade and they're poisonous. But brassicas, carrots, that sort of thing are all fine. They really love to peck and scratch those. They probably provide more entertainment than actual food, but it's great fun and entertainment, and they'll enjoy that. You can also make a toy. I had a lot of fun with this 500-litre water bottle filled with wheat and 2 holes in the bottom, and every time they peck it, 2 grains fall out. They peck the grains, they peck again, keeps them busy for ages. Highly entertaining, better than anything on TV. Now, that brings us to probably the most important part of the talk, which is the chook's diet. Chooks love to eat, and it's a really great motivator and trainer of chooks. And giving them a healthy diet is really important, especially today's chooks, because they lay so many more eggs than the chooks of the past. So chooks in the wild laid only 8 to 12 eggs, and they just foraged around the forest floor. So they didn't need a really nutritious diet, because they only laid 1 setting of eggs a year. We've actually bred chooks to lay much, much more than that. And even 100 years ago, chooks probably only laid about 100 eggs a year. But now that you have Isa Browns who lay an egg every day of the year, they probably eat about 110 grams of feed a day, and they might lay a 60 or 70 gram egg. You can see that more than half of what they eat actually goes towards making their eggs. And the nutrition in the egg is completely dependent on the chook's diet. So if we want to have healthy eggs full of vitamins and minerals for us for breakfast, then we need to feed the hens that really healthy diet. And it's really easy to do, which is fantastic, because the work has been done for us. So hens, having a healthy diet will not only mean that they meet their laying potential, but it also means that they will have a really healthy immune system, and they'll be able to throw off any health challenges that come along and get better much more quickly. And they're also less likely to have naughty behaviour like egg eating or feather pecking if they're getting all their nutritional needs met by their diet. And super easy. So chook's diet needs to include carbohydrate, fats, about 16% protein. They need vitamins and minerals. They need some greens. They need to have some shell grit, and they need some hard grit. So the very main bulk of their diet, their nutritional needs are met by a balanced layer ration. This could be a mash premix, it could be layer pellets, or it could be mixed grains. They're all good as long as they're balanced, which means that everything's in the correct ratio for their needs. So which do you choose? It actually depends on what your chooks like. It's really up to you. They're all good. Chooks tend to prefer the grains, but the trouble with the grains is they can be quite selective and flick through them and flick out the ones they don't like onto the ground, which is naughty and wasteful, and only eat the ones that they like, which can be a bit unthrifty. Pellets combine everything that's in the grains, only in a sort of smaller combined ground up format. So that is what I choose to give to my chooks for their breakfast and dinner. So I know they're getting their full nutrition, And then when with the grains, I give that to them as scratch and a bit of incentive. So they get a handful of grains in their run when they get locked up in the morning after their morning happy hour. They might get another handful in the afternoon after their afternoon happy hour. And just popping a bit of grain in, encourage them to scratch around and have a bit of fun. So they get the best of both worlds. Grain's really good for their gizzard and it's more natural, so it's good for them to have some, and they do enjoy them. Rather than pellets, you could equally choose to serve a mash, and that just means that it's the same thing but wet, or you can make your pellets into a mash. So do make sure that that makes up the bulk of your Chooks diet, because then you'll know that they are basically meeting their potential. So as I said, an ISA brown probably eats about 110 grams of feed a day, but you don't want to underfeed your Chooks, because so most people just put out a bowl, or they have a self feeder and let the Chooks feed themselves. So they usually know how much they want to eat. So it doesn't hurt to be generous with your Chook feed. So as well as the grains, Chooks really like to eat grass, and they need to have some greens every day to stay healthy. And that also gives our yolks the beautiful orange colour from the colour of the grass, believe it or not. So my kids think the lawn is for them. It's actually a greens bar for the Chooks. They love to come out and have a big peek at the grass. Grass can't meet their nutritional needs overall. It mostly provides fibre and vitamins. But it's great for them to have some every day, and that would be where you might be hanging some greens for the garden for them as well. One thing to be careful with, really long strands of grass can tangle up and get caught in your Chook's crop and cause impacted crop. So make sure that they're only accessing nice short grass that they can bite off, and not those really long strands, which can be dangerous. Grass cuttings are fine. If you've mowed the lawn, I always put the grass cuttings in for the Chooks, and they'll scratch them around. I don't think they tend to only eat the smaller bits, but as long as the grass isn't too long, that's fine as well. Now, scraps are a great supplement to a Chook's diet, and frankly, there is nothing more satisfying than giving the Chooks the kids' sandwich that they brought home from school and didn't eat, because you feel like at least you've got some value from the damn thing. So all sorts of scraps can be good for Chooks, but basically if it's healthy for you, it's probably fine for the Chooks. Keep in mind though that scraps by themselves don't meet the Chook's dietary needs and are usually quite low in nutrition. They're more there as morning and afternoon tea and a supplement and a bit of entertainment and fun and something to do. And the Chooks enjoy some of them. As we've talked about, some of them they simply may not like. I've never seen a Chook turn down a corn cob though, I can tell you now. So avoid giving them salty, sugary or fatty food, not good for us, not good for them. And any carbohydrates that we would eat cooked, they would also need cooked, like rice, lentils, potato peelings, anything like that. Pasta needs to be cooked for Chooks, otherwise it will blow up in their gut and cause them some discomfort. Do avoid giving Chooks anything with mold on it or allowing them in the compost, because decomposing food releases mycotoxins that are no good for anyone. So great to give them wilted lettuce, sandwich crusts, a soft apple or a mushy peach, any wilty things from the fridge, but not if they're growing mold. They would go straight into the compost. Now you can put the scraps on the ground in the Chook pen, or you can hang them up, whichever your Chooks prefer. You would expect your Chooks to eat some of them. For example, they like eating the watermelon, the pink part of the watermelon rind, but obviously they're not going to eat the green part. So do move your scraps into the compost in a timely manner. So you don't want them laying there once the Chooks are sick of them, growing mold and also attracting flies, rats and mice. That's no good for anyone. So probably within the day, they've had a good go at it, I would then move the scraps on into the compost. You can also have fun growing some feed for Chooks, but I would also consider that a supplement. But any greens are great to grow to Chooks, so silver beet, kale, any spinaches, they will love doing that. They absolutely love the brassica leaves, so that's a fantastic thing. And if you've got enough room to grow some grains, you could grow chia or anything like that. Wheatgrass is great for Chooks, and that's a terrific supplement for them as well. But do remember to feed them their pellets every day so that they're getting that key nutritional needs met. Now, chooks lay eggs. The shells are made from calcium carbonate, so they really need to have access to shell grit every day. It's important to leave a bowl of shell grit out for them to help themselves too, because they like to eat it at the time for best absorption overnight for creating that egg. So that would be about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is probably not when they're eating their pellets. They will help themselves to their shell grit. It gets absorbed, it creates the egg, and anything not used is then excreted. So it's important they have a supply of shell grit all the time. The shell grit to buy is the medium grade, which is the perfect grade for their purposes. And I bought a bag about 5 or 7 years ago. It cost me 20 bucks. I'm about halfway through it. They don't eat a lot, but they just need to have it there. So do yourself a favor, get some, leave it out. You'll love having it, and they will thank you for it. If you want to, you can dry out the Chooks egg shells and supplement the shell grit. Do dry them out in a low temperature in the oven for a while, because you want to dry out the egg. You don't want to be feeding them uncooked raw egg back to them, because that's not good. So, but also do give them the shell grit rather than replacing it with the eggshells, because if they come to you with a calcium deficiency, they won't make it up from their own stores, so they might end up staying in a calcium debt, and we want them to have lots and lots and plenty of shell grit. And just a funny quirk, who can understand chooks? Apparently they like shiny, bright, new looking shell grit more than old, dusty shell grit. So it might not seem like they're eating some, but they probably have a little bit each day. And if it looks really dry and dusty, just piff it out and put some new fresh stuff in there so that it's appealing to them. Chooks need cool, clean water every day. It should be, we know it should be nice and clean. And there's all sorts of systems you can choose for feeders and waterers, and it's really just whatever suits you. So we can see here that there's a nipple setup, and we've also got my Chook Whitey eating from a wide mouth, drinking from a dog bowl, which I really like. And another common water is your bell water, which is white with a green bottom. They work really well too. One thing that I would just suggest is that over summer, it's a great idea to have 2 waters out for your chooks rather than just one. And if you do choose a nipple system, please over summer put out a bigger bowl of water for your chooks, because research has found that chooks drink less over the day from the nipple system. It's a little bit more intuitive for them to bend down and drink out of a big bowl than it is, even though they can be trained to drink a nipple, and they're great over winter. So even if you put out an ice cream container full of water for them in summer, it also means they can get their head in there, and when they're having a drink, they'll wet their wattles under their chin, we've all got one, and their comb, and keep themselves cool that way. So it's a great idea to make sure they've got plenty of water. And it turns out that chooks don't like warm, tepid water in summer. So if you can put some ice cubes or a frozen water bottle, 500 milliliter water bottle in there over the day, it will keep the temperature of the water cool, and they'll keep drinking more of it. Now, just before we stop shortly, I'll talk about health. So if you take care of all the things we've discussed today, if the chooks have got a really healthy diet, they've got a sensibly clean house, they're not stressed in any way, they're not crowded, they've got plenty of space and things to do, they're going to be healthy chooks, and you're going to have less trouble with any health problems. So you know that you've done the right thing. However, even in the best systems, sometimes chooks do get sick or they get injured. So do keep in mind you may have to visit the vet when that happens. There's some illnesses and injuries that do need to have the vet's attention and can't be fixed at home. So find your vet, your best local vet for chooks. Mine is not my closest vet that I take my cat to. I actually go to a bird vet 2 suburbs over, and I have built that relationship up so that if a chook gets sick, I know that I can go exactly who to go to with that vet. It's organised beforehand, because sometimes you can get a bit upset when you find a hurt or sick chook and you're not thinking very clearly. So get that organised beforehand. Vets are not subsidised by Medicare like doctors, so keep in mind that you're looking at $100 or so. But chooks are pretty cheap overall, and as good managers of our chooks, it's really important that we give them the best care when they get sick. So chooks are prey animals, and it's natural for them to hide when they get sick to the last minute. But whether it's with chook keeping, in gardens, parenting, observation is really the key to success. So if you're spending time with your chooks and just keeping an eye on them, and if you know how they generally behave, you'll notice if one looks a bit peaky and you'll be able to step in quickly. I actually recommend having a maintenance Monday. So it might be once a month. You just go into your hen house and pull the chooks off the perch and just have a quick look at them. Look at their vent or their bottom to make sure there's no dags, which you might need to cut off a bit of poo. There's no lice or mites on the vent or under the wing. And just look at their legs, that there's no rough scales that need to be oiled. Have a look at their face and make sure their eyes are clear, their nose is clear. There's no snotty, crusty, smelly, yucky, coldy looking business going on, and just that they look bright and healthy. And also you might like to feel their keel bone, which is the bone here, so that they're not too fat and too thin. If you see a chook suddenly become very thin, that might be a time to take them for the vet for a checkup. So we can't be vets at home, but what we can do is provide supportive care for our chooks. And what that means is giving them special care that gives them the best chance of getting better. So the first thing you do is always to move your chook onto a quarantine cage, so that they are not infecting the other chooks, but also to give them the peace and quiet and the access to feed and water that they need to get better. And you don't return them until they're completely well, because the pecking order can be quite tough, and a sick chook will go to the bottom of the pecking order and they may not feel comfortable or may be excluded from feed or water. We don't want that. Really handy having them in this quarantine cage, because you can easily reach out and get them to take them to the vets if you need to. And you can medicate their feed and water without doing the other chooks. And you can keep an eye on how much they're eating, how much they're drinking, and what their poo looks like, which is always a great indicator of things going on. I use my A-frame here, which I bought for online for 90 bucks, pretty good deal, for broodies, to debrood them, for clucky chooks, with babies. So if I'm hatching, I'll put them in here. And sometimes chooks will have behavioural problems, like they might start feather pecking or even crowing or being a bit of a bully. And in those cases, the first step is that you take them out of the flock for 2 weeks to have a bit of a cool down period, and take them back into the flock. And they will have to fight their way up the pecking order again, and hopefully that will distract them and get rid of that behaviour. You always remove the ringleader, because they're the ones who are teaching the others what to do. So it's really handy having a quarantine cage like this. So also handy to have a first aid kit for your chooks. You may not use it, but it's there if you need it. So one thing I would have up my sleeve in my first aid kit is garlic. 1 clove or 2 cloves of garlic in their water once a month, maybe for 2 days once a month, is a great tonic for them. It boosts their immune system. This has been scientifically proven, and it will help make their gut a place that's not congenial for intestinal worms. You could also do the same with apple cider vinegar. I have got some here. So 1 teaspoon in their water. It doesn't seem like much. I would imagine their water being about 1 litre, but you don't want them to taste it. That will do the same thing as the garlic. So there's no need to do both, one or the other, once a month. Rescue remedy is great if you have a stressed or hurt chook. You just dab some on their comb and it helps to calm them down. Betadine to put on wounds, always really handy. And you can also get chook vitamins. So this is the one that I use. Chooks don't need to have vitamins if they're getting that healthy ration, but it's really more if you see a peaky chook that you want to bring out and give a bit of a boost, or if a chook's been ill and you want to help them get better. These are specifically tailored for chooks, and there's lots of different kinds around for chooks that you can buy online from poultry supplies, online shops. They're all really good. Some of them go in the water as a mix, and this one particular I sprinkle on yogurt and give them a bit of a yogurty treat. Yogurt is a great way to get them to eat their medicine, because most chooks love it and will eat every bite. So if you sprinkle it or put it in yogurt, it can be a really good way to medicate them. Keep in mind that yogurt and dairy is not the chook's ancestral diet. So don't feed it to them every day, but once a month, a bit of yogurt, they'll love it. And it's really funny watching them get it all over themselves and hurry in. Great entertainment. So you might like to have a lice or mite powder on hand, and also some kitchen oil that you can use to keep the scaly leg mite, which makes their legs really bumpy and painful off their, so rub their legs in oil and that will treat your scaly leg mite. So just a few handy little things to have in hand that should cover just about every eventuality with your chooks. Now I'm ready to finish, but I have just got something for you to do at home. So I've covered a lot of content today and I really appreciate you staying with me and listening to everything, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. But the one thing I really want you to do is, if you have chooks or if you go and get chooks, is to make sure you enjoy them. So spend a little bit of time with them over the week, have a cup of tea with them and really enjoy them. They are very funny and they have lots of antics. Watching them run, watching them dust bath, it's great entertainment, and chook keeping is really, really rewarding, especially if you enjoy them. And just if you want to have a little action to go off and do, I encourage you to add this week one enrichment activity to your chook setup. So it could be a mirror, it could be a swing, it could be some hanging greens, just whatever you would like. See if you can add that enrichment activity and you'll both enjoy seeing how it goes. Now, I have also got some more information. So if you want to go off and find out more about chooks, Beck mentioned that Organic Gardener magazine has a column by me each month on chook keeping, so that's a good go-to. The Australasian Poultry Mag is an Australian magazine all about chooks, which is really handy at the newsagents. The middle book is called Happy Hens. I was a co-author and editor of this book for the ABC. I heartily recommend it. And this is the Bible here, the Chicken Health Handbook by Gail Demereau, easily bought secondhand, really handy for looking up chook illnesses in, and much more reliable than the internet, which is often full of rubbish. So handy to have those. And if you want to find me on Instagram and look at my chooks, I'm at Sunny Miller, SUNIMILLER. So I'm going to pass over to Beck for some housekeeping, and then we can have some questions. I do just want to particularly thank Beck for all her help with this talk and for putting on these series of talks. So thank you to Beck. Thank you to the City of Stonington, and a shout out to the lovely Cat Labors who helped me as well so much with this talk. So thank all of you, and thank you, and please enjoy your chooks.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Jessamy. Gosh, 90 minutes of chook talk. That was pretty amazing. And I think just your joy and enthusiasm for your chooks is so infectious. So thank you so much for sharing your love with us this morning. Yeah, I'll just wrap up for a couple of minutes and then we'll open it up for some questions. I know we've gone already a little bit over, but hopefully you've all stayed with us and we can get to your questions as well. I just want to echo Jessamy's piece of homework for you. So please, take one action from this workshop. Perhaps, if you already have chooks, as Jessamy was saying, add an enrichment activity, or just spend a little bit more time with your chooks. If you don't have chooks, hopefully you've got all the information you need to get going and get started and get some beautiful chooks in your yard. Don't have much to say. Basically, I will share a recording for this session after in a follow-up email this afternoon. I'll also share some notes that Jessamy's compiled and a fact sheet that we have on keeping chooks in Stonington, but a reminder to just go to your local council to see what the regulations and requirements are in your area. And just really want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Whether you've just tuned in today or you've watched one of our series, it's been a bunch of fun bringing you webinars over the last couple of months, and I hope you've gained some new knowledge to help out your garden, get more productive, or reduce your impact at home. So a massive thanks to Jessamy for delivering this beautiful session this morning. Thanks also to Jane, who's been helping out in the background, and hope to see you at one of our environmental events soon. So on that note, we will flick to some questions. What we've been doing is we've been taking them out of the chat and compiling them in a separate document. So we'll kind of just start working through them, and then we might come back to the chat if anyone's got any burning questions. But I might just start with a couple of things about health. Oh, you did mention feather pecking, but any advice for Sophie, whose chooks love pecking other chooks? Have you had this, and have you tried anything that works?
Sophie, it's very common behaviour, especially with Isa Browns that like to repetitively peck. So chooks will have a taste. They like the flavour, and it's actually quite a complex issue with a lot of different causes, and there is no perfect solution. But if you can make sure that they are getting that complete ration and their full sense of nutrition, so the pellets, bit of grass for fibre, which can be a factor, 16% protein in their ration. Protein can also be a factor because feathers are made of protein. And also get them out and about as much.
Oh, sounds like we've lost you there, Jessamy. Your microphone.
Yeah, I think it's just run out of batteries.
Oh, it has. We've got that's better. You're back.
Yeah, yeah, it lasted the session. That's the main thing. Yeah, so if you can make sure that they've got plenty to do so they're not getting bored, so they're doing it out of boredom, and they've got the full lot of nutrition. And you might also use that approach where you try and work out who's the ringleader that's encouraging the other chooks, and remove her for 2 weeks before putting her back in. That might calm the others down and get rid of that habit. Good luck with it. It is a bit of a pest, and we don't want it to go too far where they draw blood, because they will tend to eat what they find, and that could lead to a chook injury. So it's great that you're keeping an eye on it. Well done.
And Bella's asked a question. What about diseases from your chooks, like for example bird flu? How do you how can you stay safe when handling chooks, I guess?
Yep, so we all know how to wash our hands these days, so it's always a good idea to wash your hands after handling your chooks. Actually, research has found that chooks don't really pass diseases onto humans. You need an intermediary. Usually it's a pig. So if you've got a pig, no. But most diseases don't pass, or I don't know any diseases that actually pass between chooks and humans without going through some sort of more human-like or a number of intermediaries on the way. So I would be very surprised to hear of anyone catching an illness from chooks. They have theirs, we have ours, and they have a whole lot of different respiratory diseases, and so do we. And even though there is a bird flu, that really just affects chooks, and the flus that affect us have been transformed a number of times through other intermediate hosts before they come to us, which is not going to happen in your backyard, so you're fine. But do be sensible and wash your hands after you handle your chooks.
Belinda's asked about pros and cons of clipping wings. Do you recommend it, and how do you do it?
I do recommend it. It's a great way to keep your chooks from flying over into the neighbouring fence or from getting out of their run. It's really very easy. You cut the feathers of one wing and you will span out the feathers with the chook in your lap. If you want to keep your chooks held securely, you can wrap them in an old towel and just have one wing out, so their legs and their other wing are safely wrapped up in the towel and they're not being a bother to you. Now, you'll see that there are primary feathers and secondary feathers. The primaries are much bigger than the secondaries when you spread them out, and the primaries are first, and then there's some smaller secondaries. So you just want to cut about halfway down the primaries, and they will eventually grow back over time, but it will stop the chook from flying because it unbalances her. There's no feelings in the feathers, so it doesn't hurt. You're not near the base of the feather, so there's no danger of blood. But if you find, I had one particular Hamburg who was an absolute flyer. I actually had to cut hers probably about down to a third to keep her from flying. So start with a half and see how you go. But it's a very simple procedure and doesn't hurt the chooks.
I have one from Sharon who's asked about old mower catchers, and are they okay for nesting boxes?
Yep, I think that's a great nesting box. It's nice and dark, easy to clean. Just make sure that it's getting plenty of ventilation in there and not in a hot spot like in the direct sunlight. But if it's within the hen house and it's always in the shade, terrific, go for it. Good, good upcycle, love it.
Awesome, nice one. Alison has asked another one about the housing, I guess. Alison's asked about automatic doors and how have you used them? How have you found them, and where do you get them from?
So I have a number of friends who have tried these for me. I prefer to be a hands-on chook keeper because looking after the chooks is my fun. So I have not installed one myself. I have heard every horror story with the automatic door. So this is why I encourage people to use it as an adjunct to your chook keeping and not to replace your chook keeping. People love them. You can get a solar one. So you really just need to Google automatic door and see what's around. I know the bloke who makes the solar one. You can also get battery operated ones on a timer. The solar one takes about a month, especially in winter, to juice up. So my friend who bought it the week before she was heading overseas, actually that didn't work, but now it works beautifully once she's juiced it up. I think they're good, but do always take care to check and be careful because some of them have 2 settings. My friend didn't realise that she had that you could key 2 different timers into it, and she accidentally keyed a second timer in, whereby she had the, go to bed at 7, get up at 7, but she also accidentally keyed an extra open the door at midnight, just pressing the button, and let all the chooks out in the middle of the night, which gave her a bit of a surprise when she went out to check. So they're as good as your handling. They can occasionally run into problems like that, and that they obviously, you have to check the chooks actually went in, because sometimes they stay out late and be a little bit naughty. But otherwise, handy, great, give it a go.
Awesome. We've had a question from Emma Draper, who's she's asking specifically about Stonington's regulations around keeping them 1 metre from keeping your chooks 1 metre from a fence. This is a question that I'm not sure the answer to, so I might just get you to send it to me in an email. Just reply to one of the emails I've sent you, and I can talk to animal management and get a good answer for you. So I'm not exactly sure about that placement of chooks right on the fence and why the regulations are that way.
I think the regulation is to protect your neighbour's amenity, basically, so that they're not dusty, noisy and smelly, worst case scenario, on the fence line and bothering your neighbours. But when someone does a site visit, if that's the only place and you've got, perhaps you've got some trees growing or some bushes or a barrier put up that might also prevent that happening, then I'm sure that the person will take that into account.
Somebody has asked, Janella's asked how long you can leave chooks in the hen house on their own with adequate water and food. Could it be a weekend or?
Look, I think if you've got a spacious deep litter hen house and you've got water, backup water, food, backup food, you can leave them for a weekend. But I do encourage you to get someone in your neighbourhood to pop in once a day and just check that nothing's happened. They haven't knocked over their water or decided to, roll their feed and piff it out of the place, or someone hasn't had an injury or a fox hasn't started to dig in. So I just employ the kids on my street to have a bit of, they like to come and check the chooks once a day for me and just let me know that they're going all right. So that would be best practice, to make sure that someone is putting their head in once a day, but you can leave them for the weekend.
Good advice, thank you. Paul in St Kilda has asked about keeping poultry together, so quail, duck, geese, chooks. What's your view on housing them together?
So it's different for every species. So, for example, quail and chooks, I probably would not, when I kept quail, I've kept a couple of different types of quail, and I did keep them separately because they are small and very easily frightened. They do eat a slightly different, higher protein ration than the chooks, with a smaller, like a crumble rather than a pellet, because they're so small. And you really don't want them getting out and getting away and getting loose, because once they're out in that backyard, there's cats, there's predators, they can be quite flighty and hard to catch. Whereas you might be letting your chooks out regularly to free range. You can combine quail well with caged birds, and it's a classic to have an aviary with some quail on the bottom and some caged finches or something on top, because the quail will clean up any spilled feed. So I would find that a more natural thing, but I have kept quail and chooks. I just did have them in separate housing. The quail were in a smaller aviary style housing with lots of cover to help them feel safe, because they're nervous birds. When it comes to ducks and chooks, they certainly can be kept together, but they will require management to keep together because of the ducks' habits. Ducks need to wash their head a lot of times a day, and they also like to wet their food before they eat it. So they're really messy creatures that create muddy spots around where they eat. They can put up with a really high tolerance of muddy water, but that muddy water can actually upset chooks' guts. So once again, if you are on their water and keep it really clean and change it once or twice a day, then you'll be fine keeping the ducks with the chooks, but you don't want to let it get to a quagmire, because that might be detrimental to the chooks' health being in with the ducks. Turkeys and chooks are a no, because chooks carry a disease that's very bad for turkeys. But geese, they probably have different housing requirements, but on a farm you might have some of all these, but they might have their own house and mingle together for free range during the day.
Awesome. We might move on to food. There's quite a few questions about meat, meat protein, meat scraps, tuna. How do they go with meat?
Well, if you're feeding your chooks their pellets or mash or mixed grain, they don't need a meat supplement. So they need to have that 16% protein, but they don't need to have more protein than that. So too much protein can be quite detrimental to them, as much as under protein. So there's no reason that you would have to supplement their diet with meat regularly, because they're getting enough protein and they need to get a complete protein in their pellets. So if you wanted to feed them a tin of tuna for fun every so often, I'm sure they would thank you. They do love the cat food. I do try and stop them eating the cat food, because it's tailored towards a cat as a carnivore with a certain body size, and not towards the nutritional needs of chooks. But if they stole a bit of cat food every now and then, although I try and stop them and keep them away from that, it's not going to kill them. Raw meat is not advised to feed to chooks, because, or meat scraps. So meat scraps are called swill in farming, and swill is banned in two states of Australia, Queensland and the Capital Territory, and it's possible that it will be banned throughout Australia at some stage, because of the danger of getting exotic diseases like mad cow disease came from feeding swill to animals. So if you wanted to feed, some cooked meat to your chooks, you can, but I would probably avoid it, because it's not considered to be best practice. Meat meal, if you wanted to feed your chooks meat meal, it's really hard to source these days. We used to get it when I was growing up on the chook farm and make our own mash. I have never seen it anywhere. I actually think it might be very rarely made these days, because of the dangers that people are now aware of feeding meat scraps to chooks. But, that said, if you had the end of a hamburger and you cooked hamburger and piffed it to your chook, it's not going to hurt it. It's just considered best practice not to.
And I'm a bit afraid to ask this one, but what about feeding them cooked eggs?
Fine, go for your life.
Really? Oh.
They'll love it. It's not advised to feed them raw egg, because it's raw, and also because it will encourage them into egg eating, and we don't want to give them that idea. But if you cooked an egg and mashed it up so it was unrecognisable, it contains vitamins and minerals tailored for baby chooks perfectly, so it's going to be nutritious for them. They'll enjoy it. If you want to cook some eggs for them, you can, but just make it unrecognisable as an egg when you feed it to them, and cook it completely cooked.
Okay. Meva has asked, that she's just learned her chickens are on retirement. Can you describe egg bounded?
Yep, so egg bound is what can happen to chooks, especially ices. Once their eggs grow, you know, in their later years, the eggs are really big and they can get stuck in their tubes and they're unable to pass them. If that egg then breaks inside, then the chook will get an infection and most likely die. So there's lots of strategies suggested for getting the egg safely out of the chook if it has get stuck in the egg laying apparatus in the ovary somewhere. So giving your chook peace and quiet, maybe putting her in a dark box on a hot water bottle on a towel so she's warm, a little bit of oiling up the vent, like a ute, so a bit of oil. Some people suggest putting the chook in a warm bath. I don't encourage that because it's not natural for a chook to have a bath, and I suspect they would find that quite stressful. So if your chook is used to having warm baths and enjoys it, you could probably do that. But we don't want her to get even more stressed than she is and potentially break that egg. So I would just be keeping her warm and dark, and frankly, perhaps taking her to the vet for the vet to try and remove the egg. And an egg-bound chook looks like a penguin, so they've got a funny stance and you can tell they're trying to strain to push something out. So hope it doesn't happen to you. It does happen to Isa Browns more than we like, so good luck.
Jan has asked about food that you can grow at home to supplement bought food, like worms, soldier fly larvae, veggies. I think you mentioned grain already, but have you any experience with growing worms and larvae?
I've looked into worms and I decided it wasn't worth growing worms for chooks because worms contain very little protein and are mostly water and fibre. So they're not highly nutritious, and chook will probably enjoy eating a worm, but I don't think it makes a good enough supplement, apart from unless you wanted to just give them the enjoyment of chasing worms. Soldier fly larvae are much higher in protein, so a better option for you to grow to supplement your chook's protein. They're very easy to keep because they're vegetarian, so you can just have them on wood shavings and feed them some fruit or something. Do avoid maggots because maggots eat rotting food which can have botulism, and if that maggot eats botulism rotted food and the chook eats the maggot, the chook will get botulism and die. So soldier fly larvae farm, easily found online if you want to look it up, is a better option than maggots. Any greens from the garden are great for chooks. By all means, grow them. Amaranth, I think, is a terrific garden plant that's very structural and beautiful, but the chooks will love the seed heads dried out and hung in their yard. And amaranth is a more nutritious grain than and has a bit more meat to it, say, than just the greens. So there's lots of options, and you can enjoy growing and sharing your garden spores with your chooks. Grains, actually, most of us probably can't grow a whole field of wheat. So something like amaranth gets a big boost from a small spot, and you get the garden plant as well. It's a good option.
Beautiful. I will just quickly chime in. A couple of people asking about recordings for other sessions that we've run. I will send an email later today that has recordings of all of the webinars that we've run, so you'll be able to watch back if you've missed them. And that email will also contain a link to subscribe to our environment newsletter. So if you want to know about other events that we have coming up, we've got an exciting leadership program starting soon for Stonington residents. We've also got some tree planting and biodiversity events happening later in the year, and always have lots of free events throughout the year. So yeah, subscribe to our newsletter and you can find out about those. Someone in the chat has just asked about managing flies. Any advice there, in summer particularly?
Yep, so flies are a pest. They are attracted to chook manure. So it is a management issue. You're never going to eradicate them. But if you keep your poultry run clean and tidy and move any damp manure off into the compost, in a timely way, then there'll be less to attract the flies. Obviously move the scraps straight into the compost bin. That will also be less to attract flies. So just managing it basically to not attract them is the best way. And also perhaps having a number of fly traps around. So all you need is a soft drink bottle, cut off the top third, turn it upside down so that the neck is going into the trap. And you might put anything in there that stinks. It might be old milk, bit of meat, and the idea is that the flies go in there and can't get out the upside down neck. If you had a couple of those around your chook run, it would really help keep fly numbers down, and it is organic, so it's not going to hurt any other creatures.
Awesome. Okay, I think we've answered most of the questions. We've been trying to answer the questions that will be relevant to most people. So we've left off the very specific ones. If you have a burning question, we might take maybe 2 more in the chat, and then we'll wrap up because we've run about 30 minutes over time, and we have to let Jessamy get to her day. But we haven't had any. What Sue has asked, why 4 meters from the house? That was asked a couple of times. Thanks, Sue.
That's the specification of Stonington, and I think it's basically because if chickens can be smelly, noisy, and attract rodents, and people think it's a health precaution to keep them away from the house. But hopefully our chickens that we're keeping will be none of those things. They will be lovely. So it's just really a precaution to protect you and your neighbours.
Awesome. And Christina has asked, mite powder, is that to put in the dust bath?
So the mite powder, to work on the mites, it actually has to touch the mite. So if you found mites or lice on your chooks, you would actually physically dust it through their feathers one evening, and then wait another 3 days, do it another time. So you might do it 4 or 5 sessions, 3 days apart, and that will kill all the lice and mites, and also any that are still hatching by waiting a few times and keeping doing it. Nothing will kill lice and mites unless it actually touches them. So someone who once suggested that the lavender bush or the other bushes growing around the chook pen might keep them away, it's not going to happen unless those herbs are dried out and touching the mite, because they're so tiny, they actually need physical contact. So it's just a dusting powder. You don't need to use it if you don't have any. And fingers crossed, if you're keeping the wild birds out, you won't.
All right, well, I think on that note, we've just about hit 12:30, so I think we'll leave it there. If anyone's got any other questions, perhaps try them on good old Dr. Google, or see what communities are active in your local neighbourhood and get some of your questions answered that way. But yeah, thank you again so much, Jessamy. It's been a joy to spend Sunday morning with you, and thanks for everyone who's tuned in and stayed with us all the way to the end. I've still got 50 people on the line.
Oh, thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it.
All right, we'll end it there, and hope you all have a beautiful Sunday.